The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ask for Candy, where we talk about healing, self-care, love, sex, relationships, and what it takes to be amazing on the daily. Who I am Candace Harper, lovecoach.com, and my purpose with this podcast is to create healthy, romantic relationships all around the world, especially now that there is a worldwide health crisis. And the U.S. is imploding from its racist core, and people are in need of love and connection now more than ever. But before we get to all of that, shout out to Armed Radio and all the peeps around the world who are listening in. Don't forget to subscribe to Ask for Candy on Anchor. You can subscribe to our Ask for Candy YouTube channel, Ask for Candy Podcast. When you subscribe, even if you're busy on a Thursday night, you will never miss a show. Also, follow me on Instagram at Candy Love Coach and at Ask for Candy Podcast. And you can email me, askforcandypodcast@gmail.com, and those questions will be answered in a later broadcast. So those of you who listen in, you know that I'm a relationship coach, a workshop facilitator, and a professional matchmaker with Talkify. And if you've never heard of it, it's an amazing digital service where you can hire a matchmaker to do all the sifting and the vetting on your behalf. It's especially great for people who struggle with initiating contact or simply picking the right partner. Matchmaking and relationship coaching is my zone of genius. And the best part about it is that week to week, I get to grow and learn as I interact with people around the most intimate parts of their lives. I get to meet and nurture new clients. I get to screen possible dating candidates for them. I get to design programs and activities that deepen their ability to get to know each other. But most importantly, I get to be a part of what supports healthy beginnings and a sustainably healthy relationship. What does it take to lay the foundation for a healthy relationship? Well, certainly not abuse and enslavement. Woo, that's a weird segue, right? Yeah. So first of all, everybody who normally listens, I'm taping or recording this show at a different time than I normally do. And usually I don't do it during the day because I am in self-isolation and there's a whole construction thing going on just a couple doors down from me. So if you hear background noises, that's what that might be. Also, I'm fostering a very big puppy. He's a German Shepherd mix, and his name is Tucker, and he's as adorable as he can possibly be. And if you are anywhere near the New Jersey area and want to adopt, I'm going to be fostering him for a while. And if you want to adopt a German Shepherd mix who's very, very handsome, very smart, very easy with the training, and energetic, and a lot of fun, then hit me up before I fall in love with him, because if I fall in love with him, I might end up keeping him. Anyway, back to what I was talking about with abuse and enslavement. Not such a light topic for today. Not feeling up for a light topic for today. And the reason I'm recording this at a different time than I normally do is because I'm really struggling with what I want to say. You know, not that anybody's out there waiting for my thoughts on the social conditions or racism or, you know, what's going on in the United States right now or what's going on in the world right now. But for those of you who do regularly listen, I feel like the onus is on me not to gloss over things that are of humanity, because I talk about love. And even though I normally talk about love in a very flippant and light, hopefully sometimes funny, but, you know, joyful kind of way, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't address what's going on in the United States right now. And if I didn't address some of the feelings and thoughts that I've been having around it, because, you know, I would imagine that there's a lot of you out there that might be having the same feelings and thoughts, and a lot of you out there who might have different feelings and thoughts. And I think, obviously, I'm because I have a podcast, I feel like talking about our feelings, talking about what we think, talking about our experience is extremely important. And it's a big part of intimacy and love and connection, which you know is something that I am a big advocate of as Candace Harper Love Coach. I'm all about all the different ways that we can love each other and increase our connection to each other and be more humane. And even though I put it in the Trojan horse under the guise of romantic love, really what I'm talking about applies to all kinds of relationships and all kinds of love. Now, normally, what I would do, which I often do, is write out a list or find an article that someone else has written out and break it down and talk about each of the points and really get into, possibilities for how you can navigate the different points or how you can do the different things that, maybe I suggest or someone else suggests. But I didn't want to do that for this show because I didn't want to come off like I was advising anyone for how they need to be in this current situation. Because I don't know that anybody knows rules for how people need to be in this current situation as far as their feelings, our feelings, everyone's feelings. I think that this is one of those times in life and in the world and in our existence where something has such a colossal effect that it actually shifts the mass consciousness. So there are no, just like the pandemic itself, and I love that a lot of people are saying things like, that that racism is also a virus and that it's also a health crisis, because it is. It's a mental health crisis, and obviously because people are murdered, it's a physical health crisis as well. And I don't know why that makes me want to cry. I do know why that makes me want to cry. Because part of the reason that I do the work that I do as a coach is because I believe so wholeheartedly, and sometimes it sounds Pollyanna to people, that I believe so wholeheartedly in the importance of love and peace and being able to live a life that is with safety and growth, and and I know so many people in the world don't get to do that. Those of us who get to do that are very privileged. So all of us have some level of privilege, but I think the most detestable and insidious thing about racism is that it takes away people's ability to live with peace. It takes away people's ability to feel like they can freely grow and that they have freedom and that they have all of the opportunities and the allowances that this country was supposedly built on. And obviously, clearly, I know all the history, so that's clearly because of the history of this country and how this country was built, yes. But, I guess as a human being in this day and age, it's really difficult to connect with your own humanity and just be okay with anyone having to suffer. And by suffer, I mean anyone having to walk around without peace. And those of us who have melanin, myself included, have many stories and many instances where our peace has been threatened, or where our freedom has been threatened, or our opportunities have been limited. And so I say that so badly, not wanting to sound like a victim. And also not wanting to judge people who do sound like victims or want to take a victim stance. Because I so strongly believe that we as people of color have been victimized and have been, over the generations have met with a lot of atrocities, but are not victims. I don't identify my race as a victim race. And I don't identify with the idea of victimhood. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean that I haven't experienced things in my life that I was a victim of. And by victim, I mean things that I had no control over happening to my life. Things that and even that is hard for me to say, that I had no control. So it's a very, very dangerous and fine line because, there is victim blaming, right? So, I don't want to get into that conversation of that, people are responsible for what happens to them. I don't want to get into that conversation. I do want to get into the conversation of how we respond to what happens to us, because things do happen to us that are beyond our control. And I hate to admit that. I hate to say that. I hate to come from a place of that there's anything that's ever happened in my life that was beyond my control. But I realize, and that's something that I'm piecing together as I'm talking to you right now. I realize that for me personally, that's something that I have to come to terms with. Maybe for a lot of us out there, it's something we have to come to terms with. Clearly, slavery was not something that our ancestors asked for. It's not something that anybody ever in the history of the world has ever deserved. However, it's a hard position to be in when you're someone, and I should say let me use I statements. I am someone who feels very fortunate and blessed to be born in the time that I am born in, and very fortunate and blessed to be able to have the freedom to say that I make the choices and I can be responsible for what happens in my life, and I create my own life. But as I said earlier, I also have to be present to that there are things that have happened to me that were out of my control, and there are things that happen to people every day, George Floyd, that are out of their control, because George Floyd would have never asked for that. And Ahmaud Arbery would have never asked for that. Breonna Taylor would have never asked for to be murdered. And so many people before them, so many people long before we even had social media and knew how often this was happening, would not have asked for that to happen and have no responsibility in the murder itself. So why do I say all of that? Because I think there's a very dangerous narrative that's happening right now that worries me. Because I see a couple of videos, I've seen a lot of young people, and even one where, a couple celebrities tweeted the video where a young person was saying, we won't be better until they are better, till they be better. And I hate that narrative. I hate that narrative because it's a narrative, someone who works in relationships, it's a narrative of codependency, that I can't be better until you are better. And what it suggests is, and I keep saying it, I feel like America is one gigantic abusive relationship a lot of times, most of the time. But what I say about that is that although we're not responsible for the actions of others, and we're definitely not responsible for the hate and the vitriol and the actions that people take through that hate and that fear, we are responsible for how we recover, how we heal ourselves, how we frame what's happening to us, what we see it as, how we see ourselves. Over the past week, I've just been writing down just random thoughts that I've had about this whole situation. And one of the thoughts that I wrote down, just because it came into my head, was my ancestors fought and died so that I could choose to never be diminished or demeaned by the mental illness of racism. And it's hard. It's hard not to feel like when something happens to one of us, that it's not speaking to the importance of all of us. And it's hard to have hope in the midst of it all. It's hard to stay positive. It's hard to imagine that it will ever be any different when something like what happened to George Floyd happens, when someone is murdered in that way. But that's the thing. If we allow ourselves to be diminished or demeaned, if we allow the actions of someone else to speak to our value and who we are as a people, and by allow, I mean if we take it on as truth by living into it. So let me put it this way. If I don't believe that my life has value, if I don't believe that I am deserving and worthy of everything that the people around me or people of another color, or, that everything that the country I live in promises, if I feel like I am not worthy and deserving of those things, I'm going to behave in a way that aligns with what I feel about myself. And when I don't feel good about myself, that means that my actions, my thoughts, my beliefs give rise to my actions. And that means that my actions are going to be in alignment with someone who doesn't feel good about themselves. And we all know people, if we aren't currently people who don't feel good about themselves. I've been someone who didn't feel good about myself. And what that meant was depression and abusive relationships, bad situations, physical pain, problems with my health, miscarriages, conflicts with people that really should have never happened, eviction, money problems. All of that stuff is symptomatic of not feeling good about ourselves. All of that life stuff that happens is symptomatic of not feeling good about ourselves. And so, going back to the mental illness of racism, or the mental defect, I should say, of racism, when we agree, when we take on this idea that we are less than, and when we have for generations, even though a lot of us don't want to admit it, for generations we have taken it on. And I don't blame us for that. Because if you think about early generations of slaves and, what was ingrained in them, beaten into them, tortured into them, as far as their self-worth, the fact that they were 3/5, we were considered 3/5 of a human being in the Constitution and treated as animals. It's no wonder that we would have a generational legacy of low self-esteem. And this is why I do what I do as a coach. Because, like I said, when we have thoughts and beliefs that say that we are not worthy, and when we feel diminished and demeaned by the actions of other people, our behaviors and what we create in our lives are in alignment with not feeling worthy. And so here's the things that I feel like I could take responsibility for. So if I buy into a story that because I'm a Black woman, that my life is not worth as much to other people, and that's absolutely true. There's definitely people out there for whom my life is not worthy, and that's their mental defect. But if I allow myself to agree with it, meaning that I give up my hope because there are people who are in power who believe that my life is not valuable and believe that I am not worthy, then what I will do is act in alignment with not feeling worthy. What I will do is act in alignment with a low self-esteem, and I will relinquish my hope believing that I live in a place where other people who are in power, and I put that in quotes, don't believe that I'm worthy. So why do I say all of that? Because I do feel like, back to the when I hear that saying, we can't be better until they are better. The danger in that is that we release ourselves from the responsibility of being better. White people in power in this country are not our parents. And even if they were our parents, I would, the conversation would be that you have to be better even if your parents aren't better, even if you come from anyone who's ever survived a parent who was drug addicted, or an physically abusive parent, a sexually abusive parent, any of that stuff. Anybody who's ever survived that knows that they had to heal despite the fact that their parent did not heal, despite the fact that their parent still has whatever issues they have that caused them to be that they are. And I say that to say that the power in this country, they're not our parents. They're not our caretakers. We cannot trust them to be our caretakers. They are not our moral compass. I could get into a whole conversation about religion and slavery and slave religion and the framing of Christianity that was thrust upon us as a people. They are not our moral compass. They don't get to decide what is and isn't okay behavior. Now, I say that completely aware that they do take on that decision by killing us and hurting us. However, this is where we get to be a stand for ourselves. And that's why I think so many of these protests around the country are amazing, is that it's really about taking this positive stand for our worth. And Michael Che does this whole bit about how saying that Black Lives Matter is an affront to people. Like, that was controversial. Like, to matter, not to be supreme, not to take over, not to stage a coup, but just to say that we matter was controversial. And I think the reason that it was controversial is because the moment that you stand in your own value and stand in your own importance, and by stand for it, I don't mean go out of your moral character and try to hurt people and hurt things and destroy, because that is not a sign of self-worth. So, the looting, the violence, anyone who's out there trying to hurt people or, plotting anything that's going to hurt anybody, that is not a sign of self-worth. That is not taking a stand for yourself. That is not anything that will gain any level of respect. That is not going to change the minds of anyone. That is not going to affect change. It's actually going to legitimize the hate. And I don't say that to shame anybody who feels like that's the way, because I understand the anger and I understand where it comes from. I understand where the hurt comes from. But what I'm talking about is knowing who you are, understanding your value, and being able to take a stand for who you are and your value. Being able to die for it. Being able to live for it, and, just being willing to do what you need to do to have your voice be heard without breaking your moral character, your moral code. And I didn't want to make this like a preachy thing where I'm preaching to people about how they should feel about everything or anything like that. But I do want to use sort of like the micro example of one-on-one relationships to illustrate, why thinking that they have to be better in order for us to be better is dangerous and is ineffective. Because as long as we're willing victims, they will never be better. And in a micro example, in one-on-one relationships, it is very rare that the abuser turns the relationship around. The victim has to be the one to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. The victim has to be the one to love themselves enough, to raise their self-esteem enough to say, I'm not agreeing with this anymore. The victim has to be the one to say, you are not my owner. You are not my moral compass. You don't get to decide. I get to take a stand for myself. I get to understand who I am, and I get to develop a framework for my moral character that is workable and that will have me being valuable in my community. And the reason I say that is because I think, without preaching to people whether they should be good or bad or any of that, I do think the consideration has to be, if I love myself and I'm in alignment with loving myself, if I'm in alignment with self-esteem and knowing my value and knowing my importance, there's actions that I just won't take because I won't put myself and others at risk. I don't see myself as the hand of vengeance. I don't hurt other people because I understand my connection to humanity. And even those who hate us are part of humanity and the human experience, and whatever you may believe about that. I'm a big believer that we're all souls walking around in these human suits, and we are all connected to one thing. That just some of us are so conflicted and so confused about what humanity is that we don't know anything but hate and fear and control. And so there's so many quotes about how, there's a great one by Martin Luther King about that darkness cannot drive out the darkness, only light can do that. And, part of what that really means is you hate and fear and violence and control, met with hate, fear, violence, and control, does not solve any problems. It doesn't improve the situation. It doesn't shift anything, which is why it's so important, and I won't be able to stress it enough, that we love ourselves, as people of color, all people of color, Black people specifically, but all people of color, and that we not be afraid to do that in a way that fits in with our moral framework and our moral character. And there's nothing that dictates that through loving yourself, that the only way to respond to things that aren't loving is through anger or through our fears. Our fears and our anger are natural. We definitely have a right to feel them, and we definitely should process them and feel them. But with that said, I also feel like it's so important that we understand rising above. So another note that I wrote was, condemnation of my character and the character of my people requires agreement to flourish. And, what I in reading this again, what I believe I meant by that was, exactly what I explained. Do we want to agree? Do we want to be devalued and then also behave in a way that is devaluing to us? Do we want to allow ourselves to be controlled by someone else's defect? So on a micro level, if you get into a fight with somebody, and I don't say this from on high because I've gotten into fights with people where something they said or did felt, like such a conflict and such an attack, or was an attack. And my response was to mix it up with them and get right in there with it and get right in there on the attack and be ready to fight and be ready to hurt somebody and be ready to say something just as nasty as what they said to me and get back at them. And I can't remember a single time in my life where that ever felt good. I can't remember a single time in my life where that actually ever caused any sort of change. But the thing about it is that it required for me to agree on some level with what that person said, or to be afraid that what that person was saying was true, for me to get to that level that I would go out of my moral character and meet them where they are, as far as however mean or nasty they might have been towards me. And so even as a community and as a people, it does require a level of agreement for my character to be condemned. It does require a level of agreement for someone's condemnation of my character to flourish. I have to live into it. I have to give into it. I have to believe somewhere in my heart that it's true, and then act out of that, out of believing that it's true. And I guess ultimately I'm saying all of this because I want us to be able to feel all the feelings, go through the entire gamut of emotions, feel the hurt, feel the anger, and be able to process it like the goddesses and gods that we are, with this amazing, amazing resilience and capacity for love and survival and thriving. I mean, you think about the history of Black people in this country and what we have come through. And I don't, whoever is out there listening, whatever your opinions are, this is not coming from a victim place. But if you come from an ancestry that is a slave ancestry, that is a poverty ancestry, and you are in this modern world and experiencing privilege on any level, because we all are. I mean, we talk a lot about white privilege, but if you look at the whole global scope of the world, to live in America, at least up until this pandemic, there was a lot of privilege, and there still is a lot of privilege. There's a lot of privilege in this country, and it crosses the color lines. But when you think about how far that we have come, and I know people hate it when people say that, but you got to focus on what you want to grow. You got to focus on what you want to magnify. So there is positivity. There is positive aspects of life in this country. It is possible for Black people to become very, very wealthy, as well it should be, and have some power. Granted, it's not equal. It's not equal. It's not equal for men and women. It's not equal for people of color and white people. It's not. But when you think about how resilient we are as a people, what we have survived, and what we have come through in order to get to this point, and when we focus on that, when we focus on the strength that it took generation after generation, when we focus on the positive moves that we as people have made, just the fact that getting mental wellness care is something that's being more accepted in our communities, and a lot of the stigmatization of things, is starting to soften. All of that stuff is what we need to be focusing on. Is where are these positive shifts happening? They say what you focus on grows, and what you want to magnify is where our energy needs to go. And recognition that we have come a long, long way. And yes, there may still be a long way to go. Clearly there is. But I can't help, and I'm the silver lining girl if you normally listen to me, but I can't help but feel this as an amazing shift. What's happening? I think George Floyd's life was not in vain. I think that he will go down in history as a pivotal existence for having shifted, just by his death being videotaped, his murder being videotaped, it is going to shift this world, and it already is beginning to, in a way that we have yet to see the outcome. And, I tend to believe in my personal life that things always work out, that things always turn out okay. And that might sound like I'm being blind to what other people suffer. And it might sound like I'm being flippant about it, but I'm not. I'm 100% not. I do strongly believe that we create our own experience on a lot of levels. Back to what I was saying before, because I don't want anybody getting mad about it. Yes, there are things that people do that are out of our control. There are things that people do to us that are out of our control. But I have an enormous amount of faith in the workings of the universe, in our existence as human beings here on this earth, that we are, even though we believe the opposite a lot of times, we are not here to merely suffer. I think our suffering comes a lot from how we frame our experiences and whether we choose to let them define us or not. Now, I say that knowing that there are a lot of us who don't know any other choice, who don't feel like it's a choice to let our experiences define us. But I think that that's part of the journey of being on this earth, because as we get older, a lot of times, not all the time, we get to develop this understanding that we can let our experiences define us, or we can define ourselves based on our experiences. And so what do I mean by that? We can either allow ourselves to continue to be diminished and demeaned by the actions of others. We can allow it to change our moral character and chip away at our hope. We can allow that. That's a choice that we can make. It's a reasonable choice. It's an understandable choice. You can see why a lot of people would lean towards making that choice. And out of making that choice, that loss of hope, that diminishment, that demeaning, we can then make choices in our lives and in our families' lives that represent that choice. Or we can feel what we feel, our anger, our sadness, and we can choose to not let it diminish or demean us, our personal value. We can choose to let it be the impetus for how strong and amazing and miraculous that we can be as a people. And we've proven that over and over again in so many different ways. I'm sorry if I sound hyperbolic, because I know we get enough of that with Trump. I jumped on this podcast without researching things that I could cite. Like, how can I cite throughout history the ways that Black people across the diaspora have chosen to live in their strength and live in their bravery and live in their courage, live in their abilities and their talents and their creativity. I mean, there's just so many examples. And so that's what I invite. I mean, it's something that I am choosing to focus my attention on. Yes, it's good to keep up with the news and to know what's going on. But for me, what I'm focusing my attention on in this time, and you can do it if you want to, is where can I give? What can I do? How can I affect positive change? Where can I donate money? Where can I give my time and attention, my focus? Who can I support? Every Monday evening, I do a free epic circle with women of color. I mean, everyone's invited, but it's, mainly women of color. And I'm happy to have it that way. But like I said, everyone's invited into the conversation because I think that's part of the healing. So for me, it's about really looking for all the places where I can show up as a positive contribution to what it means to have a community of high self-esteem, a community of high self-worth, a community of love. So I'm about focusing on that. Or we can choose to focus on, and sometimes I find myself slipping into it, watching the news and taking on that narrative, because the news has its own narrative, right? I don't believe that it's all fake news like our so-called president, but it does have its narrative, and what usually sells is the most negative parts of the narrative, and we rarely, unless we're really searching on social media, get to see the positive things that are going on through this shift. But what we can do is take that on and just decide that the world is hopeless, and that through hate nothing can be accomplished, and that we are released from the responsibility of having a better experience because white people in power won't allow us to, which I hate that concept more than anything. I hate the idea of that. I hate that there is anybody out there who believes that whatever their dream of life might be is hindered because white people won't let you have it. And I know that sounds crazy because that's exactly what racism is if you look at it on a surface level. But, you know, like everything that I have been saying, the beginning of creating our own experience is knowing who we are, valuing who we are, standing courageously for who we are, and not allowing anyone to bring us out of our moral character. I just don't want us to be complicit in the racism anymore. And I think that in a lot of times, in a lot of ways, we are, when we put ourselves down, when we're colorist amongst each other, when we treat ourselves badly, when we see ourselves as unworthy, we are being complicit. I know just from my work how many of us out there have such a low self-esteem, whether it's based on the shade of our skin or just growing up in this country, in a country of racism. And I think that is where, and I don't just think that because I've made it my life's mission and in my life's purpose, but I do think that is the crux of all of this. When we start to understand our colossal level of value, and not in a narcissistic way, because there's a lot of us out there with the narcissism and the pretend self-importance, and, you know, it's how much jewelry you have on and what designers you're wearing and all of that stuff. You know, that's one thing. I'm not judging anybody if you want to be flashy, but the type of self-love and self-esteem that I'm talking about is when you know yourself and you've defined yourself, you have a moral framework for yourself. And for some people, that's Christianity. For some people, that's spirituality. Some people, that's Buddhism. You know, if you want to make it a religion, that's an easy way to have a set of rules or guide for how you live your life. But also, it's good to take a look at who you are, knowing that you're valuable and understanding what your core values are and why your core values are what they are. So if you're someone who grew up experiencing a lot of abuse, one of your core values might be kindness and compassion and understanding, because it's not something that you got to experience as a child. Or, you know, maybe because you didn't experience it, you wouldn't even know where to begin with something like that. But, you know, I believe the reason that we suffer these hardships, the reasons that we go through what we go through, is that it's our challenge. It's our dark night of the soul. It's our challenge to actually live up to who we're here to be. It's our challenge to open wide what is really within us. And so as a community, I think that what is within us, more than anything, is authentic, genuine, strong self-love that is not narcissistic self-love, that is uplifting, world-changing, the kind of self-love that affects people in mass, standing for yourself, standing for who you are. I can't say it enough. But developing a moral framework and getting a set of core values and being a stand for that is going to be the apex of the healing that needs to happen. It's going to be the the impetus, the motivation. It's going to be at the very core of how this shift is going to create a new world for all of us. And I know for some of you that might sound Pollyanna, but that's exactly what this shift is all about. We are being challenged and tested to develop our human experience to the premium level that it is designed to reach. And we have been for a while. And enough is enough. Enough is enough, not just for the racism. Enough is enough for us being in a space of waiting for them to be better for us to be better. Enough is enough of trying to fight fire with fire. Enough is enough of being in some sort of standoff. Just like in the micro example of a one-on-one relationship, and if you've ever been in a relationship that breaks down, it's because of the standoff. And obviously, if it's a one-on-one relationship, you can just walk away and not live together anymore, get a divorce, sign the papers, and you're done. And usually what it takes is just for one person to say, I love myself enough that I can fill myself up, overflow onto you, and not be attached to you needing to be what I need you to be in order for me to be okay. I can release myself from the codependency of needing you to be something in order for me to be okay, in order for me to flourish, in order for me to thrive. And that's where I feel like the buck stops. We don't need anybody to be better in order for us to be better. We don't need anybody to change their behavior for us to love ourselves. We don't need to be attached to whether or not there's going to be people out there who are going to keep trying to hurt us and kill us and keep us down in order for us to begin to value ourselves. And in valuing ourselves, understand that part of valuing yourself is having hope and faith in the shift that it causes in your life. And if you've ever been in a bad relationship and then decided to value yourself, how that relationship shifted, whether it ended or that person finally got themselves together or got right, which sometimes happens. But as long as we wait for that person to change or try to change that person, try to do things to make them see, to make them understand what they refuse to see, we stay in our victimhood. And so, yeah, it's all about that self-love. It all comes down to self-love. I don't mean to soapbox people, but it all comes down to self-esteem. And as an individual, for the sake of the community, as a community, we have to start valuing our work, valuing how hard our ancestors fought for us, valuing who we are and not making ourselves wrong, not beating our children every single time they look the wrong way, or, just the ways that we beat ourselves down and devalue ourselves. It has to stop. It has to stop. Unconditional love for my Blackness. Unconditional love for my Blackness. I don't need to make myself wrong. I don't need to make anybody else wrong. I just need to love, 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 accept, understand, know, grow. Make a framework for my moral character and stick to it. Stick to my word, have integrity. Be someone who behaves from a place of value, knowing I'm valuable. Stop being late. I know that sounds silly and flippant, but even that is a suggestion that I don't understand my value in a situation when I can't show up. Communicate with each other. Communicate to people when you're not going to do what you said you're going to do. We got to look after ourselves and each other, and we can't look after each other if we're not filling ourselves up. Despite what anybody else says about us, despite what anybody else does to us. 100% what has to come first is understanding our worth and our importance. We have to start creating our own reality in a conscious way, because we do create it. We do create our own reality, but in a conscious way. And by allowing ourselves to process our feelings and love ourselves, we also get to stop walking around living in fear, because, you know, they say what you fear, you manifest, right? So that's not to say that we're responsible for how cops treat us. We're not responsible for how cops treat us. We're not responsible for people's thoughts and their racism. But when we're in situations where we act through our fears, and I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do. I'm somebody who's afraid of big spiders. When we're in a situation where we behave from our fear and we let our fear take over, we make a lot of assumptions. We act in ways that don't work. We act in ways that are dangerous for ourselves. We act in ways that incite what might already be a problem. And so we just want to be conscious of that. We don't have to live in fear. We don't have to live in fear. It may feel like we do because there's people out there hurting us. But if our concentration and our focus is on self-love and filling ourselves up, taking good care of ourselves, allowing ourselves to process our feelings, and that's where we put our focus, we'll know when to be fearful if we need to be fearful. We don't have to walk around being fearful. We don't have to walk around being fearful. Fear is in place. It's a fight or flight response. And if we walk around in constant fear, in constant fight or flight, we stress ourselves out. We are devaluing ourselves as human beings. Does that mean don't take precautions and be responsible, making sure you have all your identification, your registration, and, all of that stuff? Does that mean don't do any of that stuff? No. It means be in alignment with what it means to say, I'm a valuable person who loves myself. What actions can I take? And if you have a chance today, write down, what actions can I take that say, I'm a valuable person who loves myself? White people are not superior. They're not. We may feel like they have all the power, they have all the control, and that feeds into the superiority, but they are not superior. They are not superior human beings. We all have the capacity for kindness and compassion, and we all have the capacity for hate and vitriol and doing the wrong thing when it comes to other people. We all have that capacity. They may have the money. Collectively, they may have the money, but that doesn't make them superior. I could go on, but I only have an hour. I only have a few more minutes. So yeah, I don't know. I know there's so much more to be said, and I definitely want you guys to reach out. Vote with your dollars. Vote with your money, because Black money is very, very powerful in our economy. When you love yourself and you know who you are, you don't spend in crazy ways on crazy stuff. You start investing your money. You start actually doing responsible things with your money so that it can grow. You start making passive income. You make investments that will bring you abundance. That's what you do when you love yourself, when you love yourself from your core. I could do a whole nother show about that, but vote with your money. Don't give money to people who oppress you. Don't patronize oppressors. And that's not all. I'm not saying all white people. I'm just saying be careful who you're spending money with. And be involved in the politics. We can't give up hope so much that we won't be involved in our social situation. Vote, at the very least. Vote if you don't want to do anything else. We have to be making equitable and fair choices in our communities with each other. We have to support each other. This is not about shifting the blame or trying to blame anybody. We have to support each other. We have to love ourselves so that we can love each other and then overflow. It is not our responsibility to make up for what was done to us. It is not our responsibility for what was done to us generations and generations ago, but it is our responsibility to turn it around. It is our responsibility to no longer stand in the position of victim, to love ourselves enough to make a difference. So we're out of time. As you guys know, I'm a matchmaker for Talkify. If you want to be included in my roster of recruits to be matched with a client for free, send me a PM on Facebook. I love matching people up to go out on dates. Right now we're doing video dates. All you have to do is be single and open to being screened and ready for love. Also, I mentioned before, Monday night, every Monday evening, I host the Epic Circle. It's an online healing circle for women everywhere. We as women come together as a community. We'll be causing personal transformation when it comes to communication, forgiveness, self-love, 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 self-love. I can't say it enough times. It's all about self-love, and that's what we're talking about and healing in the Epic Circle. And that's it, everybody. I just want to say that I love you so much. I love you, people of color, and I love you, people of no color, and especially those of you who've reached out to check in on me. You know, definitely special love for you, and please just love yourself. Please figure out who you are and what your core values are and what you want to align with in this world so that you have a foundation on which to live your life, and so that we as a community can come together on a foundation and support each other with that and grow from there and continue to be a stand, continue to protest peacefully. And yeah, thank you. If you've listened to this entire podcast, I love you. I appreciate you. And even if you haven't, never forget that you are a love machine. If you ever start to feel like you're not getting the love you need, just make more and ask for candy. Thank you.